Oh, whoops. We live? I just accidentally put live, didn't I? Woo! All right.
Are we actually live?
Yep. Yeah, we're actually live.
Okay.
Hey, guys. I was just trying to see that you could try a different monitor, and unfortunately it worked. All right, so welcome. This is Speedify Live Office Hours. I'm Alex, and this is Kevin, and we are some of the people who make Speedify. So if you have questions about Speedify or networking in general, or life, the universe, anything, boop, 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 put it in the comments. YouTube, Twitch, we will see them. We will put them up. We will answer them. So while you're thinking about what your question is, why don't you hit that, follow button, smash the subscribe, whatever the button says wherever you're watching this video, bang it. Go live once a week, Wednesday mornings, and it is awesome. All right. So while we wait for you guys to pipe in with questions, we're going to talk about TCP acceleration. Because TCP acceleration is the new feature that lets you get more than double the speed using a VPN on one of these routers. In fact, almost no matter what you're doing, it gives you a big speed up. But TCP acceleration doubles your speed using a VPN on the router. And it is kind of fantastic. So, Kevin, what is TCP acceleration? Start.
Yeah, so TCP acceleration, there's different mechanisms or tactics for trying to speed up TCP speeds more than you would normally see over a particular network. And in a lot of cases, TCP can be great and fast over networks, but there's certain networks where you can hit limits. Particularly if you're dealing with latency and loss, connecting over long distances, you can sometimes run into bottlenecks. And so there's different tactics for trying to speed that up and trying to enhance the speed that you get. Before you even get the TCP acceleration, there's some tactics that people use. One of those is what we call TCP tuning, where you can adjust certain parameters in your operating system, adjust buffer size and what congestion control TCP uses. And say in a majority of cases, that's not really necessary in modern operating systems. They're good at automatically scaling buffer size and everything like that. But sometimes you run into limits if you have a really high bandwidth connection, multi-gigabit connection, or your big latency connection, a satellite connection with hundreds and hundreds of milliseconds, or a combination of those two, a fast connection with a lot of latency. You can sometimes run into limits in the operating system and hit buffer sizes. So sometimes you need to adjust that stuff, but for the most people, that's not really necessary. But it can sometimes make a difference. The other tactic application sometimes uses multiple TCP sockets at the same time. So sometimes a single TCP socket can be limited with what speed it can get over a particular connection. But if you do multiple at the same time to do a download, that can sometimes speed things up, because while one's waiting to retransmit data, the other ones can still be sending. They kind of better maximize the available bandwidth. And so that's actually something Speedify does with our transport. We make multiple TCP sockets over each internet connection, and that allows us to better maximize the bandwidth.
But there's one form of TCP acceleration we just turned on in Speedify. And the first row is this router in my hand. Speedify was getting 100, 150 megabits per second on this, which, by the way, is with one internet connection. And then we turned on this new, TCP acceleration performance enhancing proxy, and now we get 600 megabits through it.
Right, so it's a client device on the router connecting through the router, and Speedify itself is running on the router and sharing that to the client device.
So the interesting thing, is that if you look at the stats, this is a Barrel AX router from GLINet. They say the best you can get with OpenVPN on this is like 150 megabits. which is, close to what Speedify was getting with just one internet connection and no loss and no jitter, blah, blah, blah. And they say the most you can get out of it with a VPN is if you use WireGuard, you get 300 megabits, which obviously is really good. They moved it into the kernel. They got all this extra speed. But now we're getting 600 megabits, twice what WireGuard gets out of this little guy. What's going on there?
Yeah, so there's a few different things that we're doing there. So as I was talking about, when there's high latency can affect TCP, but also packet sizing can affect TCP. So a lot of times a client device on the router, if you're connecting over the Wi-Fi, for example, you're limited to the maximum size of packets that you can use over the Wi-Fi.
Which is what?
What is it for the Wi-Fi?
1480?
Yeah, 1480. Yeah, so 1500 is usually the maximum for Ethernet, and Wi-Fi is a little bit less than that. I forget off the top of my head the exact number. But in either case, even if you're connecting over Ethernet, you're limited usually to these smaller packet sizes. And so when those are coming into the VPN, there's a lot more processing that you can do because you have these more frequent packets. So what we're doing with this TCP acceleration is we're kind of splitting up the TCP connection. So rather than it going all the way from your device all the way to the server on the internet through the VPN, which is traditionally what happened with Speedify, we're now breaking it up at different points. So on the router, it's accepting your TCP connection. So you have a TCP connection between your client device and the router, which is very fast. And then Speedify is taking your data and using its own protocols, all the bonding protocols, getting it up to the server, and then the server is doing a TCP connection out to wherever your destination is. And so you have fast connection presumably between the server and your destination, and fast connection between the client device and the router, and then Speedify is responsible for handling everything in the middle. So we can process larger amounts of data at once to make things more efficient. When we're bonding multiple connections of different latencies, the TCP ACKs don't have to flow all the way back through the tunnel and react to the different latencies and reordering and things like that. We can kind of hide some of that from the TCP sockets and make the bonding work better and improve performance that way as well. But at the end of the day, to see that 600 megabits, we're making things a lot more efficient for processing that client traffic through Speedify.
So what I'm hearing is with TCP acceleration, what we're doing is you're talking TCP from your app, your browser, whatever, and you're talking TCP all the way to the router, and there Speedify is turning it into a different protocol, one that works much better over latency, jitter, loss, multiple internet connections, and sending that protocol up to the cloud, where we then turn it back into TCP, so we can do crazy other things in the middle to deal with the delays of satellites and internet connections coming and going and loss and different packet sizes and just all that stuff you don't want to think about, all of which, slow down your internet. And you just don't have to worry about it. Speedify figures all of them out now. So yeah, higher speeds, than WireGuard. Obviously, we've always been able to do higher speeds than WireGuard if you have multiple internet connections, because they're stuck on one. We can combine multiple and all that stuff. But now we're seeing, one internet connection with no loss, no jitter, none of the problems we have, smart code to fix. We're still outperforming, right? The TCP acceleration makes a huge difference. To turn it on, it's performance enhancing proxy in Speedify in the menu.
I think with the latest releases of Speedify, it's on by default for any router devices.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really at this point a router only feature because we're getting into low-level Linux stuff, some of which we may be able to eventually do on other operating systems. I have high hopes for Windows, but at this moment, this is a router feature, and it really does make a huge, huge difference. So I've read some of Larry Lessig's books, where he goes on and on about the end-to-end principle. he says, part of what made the internet great, a big part of what made the internet great is this idea that applications in the middle should not mess with TCP. That your app should talk TCP to the guy on the other side, and no one in the middle should mess with anything. And that's good because it lets both sides upgrade. If you upgrade the software on your server and your client, you can make improvements to your protocol, and you don't need anyone in the middle to know the difference. And that's why no one should ever mess with TCP in the middle. And we're messing with TCP in the middle, right?
Yeah.
So why are we abandoning the end-to-end principle that made the internet great, according to certain professors at Stanford Law School?
Right, and in a lot of cases, he's right. It is good to have that integrity end to end, but there are some cases where TCP is going to underperform what the networks are capable of, due to certain, especially as you start going through multiple hops and having VPNs in the middle. We're kind of changing the paradigm a little bit, and so we can add a lot of benefit there, I think, by breaking that model.
He didn't think about performance.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the nutshell, right? I mean, it's all well and good to be able to add new features to the protocol. Great. A good example, although they didn't quite nail it, is, MPTCP. They were able to add this idea of multipath to TCP, but the packets that go through each router just look like regular TCP, so normal routers will carry it. So you need to get both the operating system of your client and your server updated to use MPTCP. And so that kind of stinks. You actually have to get the operating system upgrade. You can't make an app that uses MPTCP until the entire operating system of both every one of your clients and every one of your servers is updated. But at least you don't need the routers in the middle updated. Or IPv6 needed all the routers in the middle updated. And that's why we're, decades in, and if anything, adoption is going backwards. It is so hard to get everyone else to update their things, right? It's absolutely brutal. But nice thing about Speedify, you just have to get Speedify on your device. It's cross-platform, and you get all of this magic. And we'll take care of running the servers. All right. Let's see. We got some questions coming in here. All right. I guess I have some Flurm. I have some questions because I saw you and was looking for ways to deal with the Bella box and found you with a dual SIM card on a cell phone with your app on the cell phone. Would it then use as a stream?
Not familiar with what the Bella box is.
So a cell phone, so imagine you have some box and it needs Wi-Fi. I'm just guessing. And you're wondering if you can use a cell phone with Speedify to combine the two cellulars. The problem is the hotspots on the cell phones go around Speedify. So if you run Speedify on the phone with two cellulars, you can combine those, but things coming in through the hotspot won't get it. So some sort of router device like this could do it. Even something like a Mac, has internet connection sharing, and when it says internet to share, you can pick Speedify, and then the clients will come through that and use the multiple devices. You can hang things to USB. On Windows, you can use Connectify Hotspot to do similar. But tell us more. I might be a little off base here. All right, Doug says, speaking of buffering, if I'm using Speedify with two wireless internet providers, how can I have a 1 to 2 minute buffer to allow for any dropouts, but due to the buffer, the viewer never sees any change? All right.
So there's a couple of things. So a 1 to 2 minute buffer is likely going to be on your streaming software side. If you're talking about that long, you can delay, usually there's settings in your streaming software, streaming service for how long you want to delay before they receive everything, before they send it out. But we also have a feature in Speedify that we recently added, the jitter buffer. This is talking on a slightly smaller scale, but similar idea, where it's buffering data that gets sent out to allow for any jitter on your connections, either due to the reordering or difference in latencies between your connections. You can set a buffer, and so Speedify will hold onto those packets and deliver them at a consistent delay. So you can do that for your streams. We have the ability to, Alex has the UI up here, so you can add rules for how much you want the delay to be, and so that's in each direction. So if you're sending your stream up, that's how much it's going to delay for the outgoing stream. So if you're applying it in both directions, it would be twice whatever that delay is. But you can add particular ports if you know a particular port that you're streaming on, or a particular IP address or domain that you're streaming to. If you have your URL for your streaming endpoint, you can take out the domain part of that and put that in there. And so then Speedify will grab that and it'll delay just that traffic. All your other traffic it'll deliver through normally. And so it can add a little bit of extra delay to your stream, but to make sure that things get through and get reordered properly, we give Speedify a chance to retransmit anything that gets lost and deliver it all consistently.
But yeah, so great feature, especially with UDP. But yeah, 1/10 of a second. I mean, it can smooth out all kinds of wackiness the 1/10 of a second. But if you're thinking the 2-minute buffer, that's something you do in your video streaming server.
Right.
Because otherwise, yeah, it's too much. That's too much for Speedify to add. Speedify's too low level. Your video software will think this is the world's slowest internet connection, which isn't what you want.
Yeah, because there's some software, depending on what software you're using and what rate. If you're doing some sort of automatic bitrate detection, if some software, if it starts seeing a lot of latency, it will scale down and think, oh, this connection is really slow. I'm going to slow down the bit rate. So you got to balance with adding enough delay to cover up any imperfections in your internet connections, but not being so long that it's going to make your streaming software think the connection's really, really slow.
Yeah. Would TCP acceleration work with any ISP?
Yeah, I mean, in the context of Speedify that we're talking about, yes, it's implemented in the Speedify client and Speedify server. So yeah, Speedify is just talking, normal Speedify transport connections, either TCP or UDP or HTTPS over top of your ISP. So it just looks like normal traffic to them and is sending between the client and the Speedify server, and we implement everything in our software. So your ISP doesn't see anything different.
Nice. Grish says, found this channel randomly. Even if I don't use the product, the random technical info is awesome. Thank you.
That's good to hear.
We have a surprising number of viewers who talk about how they don't use Speedify. They just find it so amusing to watch us explain technology. Sometimes I wonder if I'm supposed to be insulted. We're not amusing. We're serious people. All right. Can I use my phone Witsy D1 and D2 from Germany to America and Asia continent with your app on my phone streaming what I use?
From Germany.
So look, Speedify will use anything that looks like an internet connection on your device. In your device's operating system. It asks the operating system, what is every network connection you have? And then it tries to see if it can connect to the internet on it. And then if so, it tries to use it. And then it gathers stats about loss, latency, jitter, speed. And Speedify decides what it thinks about the connection. And based on that, it uses it different amounts. So a lot of this question, does it work on this carrier? Does it work on that ISP? Is usually yes. And a lot of times if something becomes very popular, we then look at, is there some special thing we can do to tweak a little extra performance out of it? Like Starlink. Spent a lot of time on Starlink. The minute Starlink came out, we worked on it instantly. But then, we spent a few weeks on tweaking things and realizing there are things you want to do differently. And if you ask the Starlink router, it would give you all these detailed stats about what it's doing. Actually, I'll go ahead and say here's a feature that's coming because of this. We read in the news about some guy who got a $20,000 Starlink bill because his Starlink thought he was in the ocean. He apparently lived by the shore. They thought he was on a ship. So they hit him the extra expensive in the middle of the ocean data rate. It turns out in the API, when we're talking to the Starlink router and we're asking it questions about how you're doing, one of the possible answers it can give you is, I'm in the middle of an ocean. We are going to add a feature in the next couple weeks where if your Starlink says you're in the middle of the ocean and you're being charged, $20 a gigabyte, it'll tell you in Speedify. Maybe you're in the middle of the ocean, you say that makes sense, and maybe you're not, and it's time to pull the plug and call Starlink and say that. So a lot of stuff like that. So in general, will it work on this phone or that phone? Will it work in Germany? Will it work if I, change countries? The answer is yes, as well as, your cellular and Wi-Fi will work on that device. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so Speedify works as a VPN, meaning that you connect from your client device to different servers around the world. And so, depending what you're doing, if you're asking if you can connect to a server in America from Germany or Asia, yes, you can. Whether that's the best idea, you have to experiment a little, whether it's better to connect to a server closer to you and then still have it streamed to the faraway location, or allow Speedify to manage more of that data path and connect to a further away server. You can kind of experiment what works best for you and where you're streaming to.
Speedify is definitely like magic. Thank you, Doug. So if any of you haven't checked out Doug Piper's work, he does great stuff with beer. Actually, last I talked to him, he was getting into coffee. He live streams and does videos and stuff about beer and the secrets. And at various points, we actually had him do private parties live stream during COVID for Speedify, where he'd recommend beers. We had it shipped to all the employees at their houses. We got on Zoom calls with Doug. Fantastic. I'm a big fan of Doug Piper. He does really great stuff. No, with my own phone to stream with dual SIM cards from my phone, stream from my phone. Okay, so dual SIM phones, all the new iPhones, for instance, have two SIMs, an eSIM, a physical SIM. Actually, by now it's a 2D SIM, so I don't know. They keep changing. They're DSDS, dual SIM, dual standby. It's one physical radio with two SIM cards. And what they do, if you have two SIM cards in there, it spends 95% of its time on the card where you have the data switch to it, right? One or the other can be the default for data. It's one of the settings. And that one is the one it spends 95% of its time on. And it jumps for 50 milliseconds per second to the other network, just to quickly ask, hey, do I have any texts? Do I have any notifications? Do I have any whatever? And then it collects those and then it jumps right back to the default network. So it seems to you magically like you're on both networks. You're getting texts from both. You're getting iMessage from both. You're getting, notifications for your apps from both. So you're like, I'm on both networks. Why can't I bond them? And the answer is because it's just one radio. It's going back and forth between the two. You're only on that second network 5% of the time. And if you gave it more percent of the time somehow, which it won't let you, you just have less time on the first network and it never would add anything. So phones that can do both at once are called dual SIM, dual active, DSDA. And they basically don't exist. A few years ago in China, there were a whole bunch of Android phones that were DSDA, and they stopped making them. Now, people point out all the time Qualcomm's new radios, which are in the iPhone 17 and the iPhone 17 Max, support dual SIM, dual active. There's actually 2 radios in there, and that is correct. Apple is not using them. There is nothing we can do to turn on the second radio. I'm not even sure if it has an antenna wire to it. They're just using Radio 1. And the fact that the chip has a second radio on it brings up an interesting thing. You know, the iPhone 1, the Wi-Fi chip on it had an FM radio in it that could pick up radio stations. But you couldn't use it. I mean, Apple didn't want that feature. They never gave you software. There were some hackers who chopped up their iPhones, got an antenna, FM antenna hanging off that chip and clipped in. Yeah, they were able to pick up radio stations, but there was absolutely no way to use it from software on the iPhone. That happens, right? Sometimes Apple buys chips that have features they don't want. They just don't use them. All right, Doug asks, is that jitter buffer on by default, or do I need to dig into setting it up? And any recommendations for jitter settings?
Yeah, so we have it on by default for UDP ports 9000 and 9010, and that's from the LiveView streaming devices typically use those ports, although they can sometimes use different ones. But by default, those are the ports that the LiveViews a lot of times use for their streaming. And that's where we did some of the testing with this, and it worked out well with their UDP-based streaming. So otherwise, if you're doing any other sort of streaming, you probably need to go into settings and add rules to enable that. And then in terms of the delay, you kind of want to look at the latency of your internet connections, and you want to set it slightly above what the latency of your I guess worst internet connection is. Unless you have one that's really, really bad, you don't want to necessarily add too much delay. But yeah, if you want to kind of have it just above to give time for things to retransmit, so you can go a little higher than whatever the latency of your internet connections is, and experiment with that a little bit higher and see. I wouldn't go more than a few hundred milliseconds usually. If you start going really, really high, then as I was saying before, that can mess with some of the automatic bitrate detection algorithms and things like that. So yeah, I guess kind of see, unless you're setting a specific bitrate and it's just going to stream at that no matter what, then maybe you'd be fine with a little bit more delay. But you can kind of experiment a little bit with what works with your particular stream.
I was kind of wondering if I should just have it on all the time at 30 milliseconds. Right?
Yeah, that could potentially, yeah.
On all my UDP traffic. So if you want all your UDP traffic, you would put something like 1024-65515. Is that right?
3.5.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 16,000 ports total.
65,000.
65,000, sorry. 2 to the 16th minus 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there might be a lot to be said for having some low across all the UDP. I think TCP I wouldn't bother, right? Unless you're in an extraordinarily weird situation. If you have one connection that has 500 milliseconds of latency and one that has 50 and you want to actually use the 500.
Yeah, it could help a little bit there. But yeah, it's more intended for UDP-based streams.
Will OBS allow those buffer settings, Doug asks? Yeah, so if you're going for 1 or 2 minutes of delay, I would look at buffers in OBS. So OBS being the open source live streaming software. If that's what you're using, I would look at that. It probably has buffer options where you can set buffers to 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's either there or it's on the receiving side, the server side software, wherever you're streaming to. There might be delay settings in there, depending on what you're,
That's right. You do want the buffer to exist on the other side of your internet connection. Right. So I do know people who are running OBS in the cloud, where they're streaming from their computer to an OBS server in the cloud and having it then stream to YouTube or whatever, or to lots of them, right? It's a good open source way to do, sort of stuff Restream does for you. You stream to the one server, and then it streams to all those different services you want to stream to, and maybe adds titles, and maybe if your stream breaks, has a default image it shows, having technical difficulties instead of letting your live stream end. So that's certainly one way to do it. All right. No, I would use the app in the S23 Ultra to put the two SIMs together because dual SIMs. So again, so the best way to use two SIMs on a phone is you have one SIM in your phone, you have the other SIM in another phone. One of the two phones makes a hotspot, and they join each other's hotspots. Or so your phone joins the other phone's hotspot. So now you're using their SIM when you go through the Wi-Fi, and you're using your SIM when you go through the cellular. And Speedify will realize that's actually a cellular connection, right? It looks like a Wi-Fi, but then we realize we're coming out on, T-Mobile or whatever, on the internet, and we'll realize this is actually a wireless connection. I should treat it like that. And it'll do the right thing and set them both to secondary and bond across both. And it makes a huge difference for live streaming. When I used to have the live streams where I walked around Philadelphia interviewing people, if I did that, if I had my phone on AT&T and I would join the hotspot of actually my Android phone, which was I had on Verizon. So I had two cellular connections on two different carriers. Every carrier has dead spots, but mostly they don't have the same dead spots, right? I mean, live streaming, you only need a couple megabits, if you're outside doing it live. And pretty much always one of them got me through it. And it would switch back and forth during the course of the stream. So that would be my advice for you. Two phones. Zaphod asks, what is the difference between Speedify and Connectify? What can you do with one that you can't do with the other? All right, so two things. So Connectify is the name of the company. And the company has two major product families. One is Speedify, the network bonding software that I've been talking about the whole time. The other is Connectify Hotspot. And Connectify Hotspot turns a Windows computer into a router, Wi-Fi or wired. Windows has some internet connection sharing stuff in it, but it's terrible. It picks your IP address, and it sometimes picks an IP address that is being used by your home router already, and you're just stuck. It's just broken in that case, and there is no setting to change it. Every time your laptop goes to sleep, it stops sharing. Even if it wakes up, you'd think, right? If you're in the middle of sharing, you put your laptop to sleep, you close the lid for a minute, and then you open it up again, or go back, just like every other Windows app. No, that is the one and only Windows app that anytime your laptop goes to sleep, it gives up. And never tries again until you go in and manually click it again. So there were a lot of reasons why we had to build this ourselves. So we'll let your PC turn into a wired router or a Wi-Fi router, and it can click into Speedify and be sharing your Speedify connection. All right. I've only had issues with Speedify on the Dish Network Project Genesis. The app will not use it and will have random dropouts. Okay, please connect your computer to a Dish Network Project Genesis connection. Try to use it, and then in the menu, go and generate logs. I'll show you this. Boop. It's going to be real quick here because I don't know much about this. So you go to the menu here, this hamburger in the top corner, you click it, scroll to the bottom, you do generate logs, and you fill in a little message here saying, just like you told me in office hours, I went and used the Dish Network Project Genesis connection, and it's not working well. You know, have Kevin read these logs. And if there's something wrong that we can fix, we will fix it. And we will get back to you. We would love to see those logs. Yeah. There's probably stuff we can do. Just, you know. Satellite connections are often weird. They often mostly work like normal internet connections and partly totally don't. So
Yeah, I would say, is there any special setup you need to do, or if you plug it into your computer, your device, or whatever, you're able to just use it like a normal internet connection without special setup or anything like that, or is there some other setup or something? I guess let us know those details either when you send the logs, or let us know here, because I'm not familiar with what's different about that versus a normal internet connection, if there's any difference.
All right. Also, can I visit Asia? My own SIM cards and dual system phone for IRL streams. So, multiple answers here. One, you know, Speedify doesn't really care. We have servers in Asia, not quite as many. You know, North America and Europe, we have servers everywhere. Asia, we have a lot of servers, but it's not, you know, in every country or anything. Sometimes you have to go kind of far. But so Speedify works in Asia. Cellular has now become standardized. 4G and 5G work everywhere. There are no longer AT&T phones versus Verizon phones. There's no longer, you know, Japanese phones versus American phones. You know, 10 years ago, you had to get the right phone that worked on the carrier in your country. And really, there were about 6 different kinds of phones that covered the world. But with LTE and with 5G, every carrier in the whole world is the same. That doesn't mean that they won't charge you $20 per gigabyte if you visit the wrong country using a SIM from Germany or something.
Right, you have to look at the roaming
I just mean
charges.
it will technically work. So I would be very careful checking in with your carrier about if I travel to Asia and tell them a specific country, the Philippines, Japan, South Korea, wherever, will it work? Actually, other exception, China. We have people using Speedify in China. We have people telling us that Speedify doesn't work in China. We are not really supporting China. If you go to China and it works, we are happy to have served you. If it doesn't work, you know,
There's not a lot we can do.
There's not a lot we can do. So, China is, you know, best effort, honestly. If it works great till you arrive in China, don't contact our support. That's what we're going to tell you. But the rest of Asia, it should work. The rest of Asia is supported, and we will support you. All right. I was only able to do what I do with Speedify. My cable ISP is so terrible. So Speedify enables me to combine my hotspot, phone, and cable to get reasonable speed. That's magic. Yes. All right. So latency is about 32. So what should the jitter setting be?
So is that for your cable? Is that for, so you want to look at all your different connections and probably look at what the latency shows as while you're actually streaming, you know, under load. What does the latency look at? And then, you know, add a little bit on top of that. So yeah, if they get up to 32, I'm assuming if you have cellular, it's getting higher than that while you're streaming. But, you know, say they get up to 50 or 70 or something while you're streaming, then you could add a little bit more. Usually that's going to be round trip time you're looking at, and you know, you have the one-way delay in Speedify, which defaults to 75, so that's 150 round trip. So that the default in that case would be fine. But yeah, if you're getting latencies going up above, you know, 100 milliseconds or something like that, then you might want to bump the delay up a little bit more. But yeah, you want to, you know, a little bit, add, you know, 20 or 30 milliseconds to the latencies that you're seeing while you're streaming. And that's probably enough to have as the delay. You want a little bit above whatever the maximum latency of your different connections are.
All right. Doug says, would you recommend OBS in the cloud for my lousy ISP for streaming? I'm unaware of OBS in the cloud. I think So OBS in the cloud is a do-it-yourself solution, which isn't even necessarily cheaper. We used to use Restream, and that was pretty good. It's a commercial service. I don't remember what we were paying for it, and I think they're changing their deal all the time anyway, where we would live stream to them, and then they would live stream to everywhere else. Now we're just restreaming. We used to stream to like 5 places at once, and so that was really important. Now we're streaming to YouTube and to Twitch, and our internet here is, pretty good. Even the cellular is. Whoa! I don't have a second connection here. I haven't had my phone tethered. There we go. Let's give Speedify a second connection. There we go.
We had a pair and share.
Yeah, we had a pair and share. So now we have 3. So here are internet connections. We have Ethernet.
To Speedify? Are we going through a router with Speedify?
Speedify. Okay. What have they done in my studio? So we're going into some sort of Speedify router. So that probably has a lot of internet connections somewhere. Then we have Wi-Fi to the Comcast cable. Then we have USB to this AT&T wireless cell phone, and then we're using pair and share to connect over the Wi-Fi to my Android phone, which I loaned to Will, but Will's in the office. So even though I don't actually know exactly where that phone is drifting around, it is offering to kick in and loan Speedify some internet. Yeah. So, interesting stuff, right? So something like Restream might be a saner suggestion if you don't want to go down the rat hole of building your own complicated thing. And if you use OBS instead of Restream, you can build your own complicated thing, right? Or you could change formats and this and that, and add graphics and add animations, and you can insert a live web browser into your video stream on the way out if you wanted that for some reason. But you probably don't. There's probably a good chance that Restream does what you want. Another competitor of theirs is Switchboard, which is funny because they're located in Philadelphia, and at the very, very beginning, we thought about calling Speedify Switchboard. And someone who's 6 blocks away used the same name for their software. So they also have live streaming server software. So you stream to them, they stream to everywhere else. Some of these guys are starting to have really advanced features, which might or might not be a benefit. They can do things like, if you're a guest on a live stream, you can go in and temporarily give that person permission to live stream to your channels just for the day you're the guest. So they can take over your channel, but just for the one day, and they don't have your password or anything. So they're starting to do really sophisticated stuff, which implies you might be able to get away with whatever their cheapest plan is if you don't need that stuff, right? All right.
We got somebody from Verizon.
We got somebody from Verizon here.
Hello.
Hey. Should one just set UDP for all IRL streams?
Not necessarily. Keep doing it. It's going to depend on what protocol you're using, what protocols are supported by whatever service you're streaming to. So if you're using RTMP, for example, that's TCP based. SRT is UDP based, but not everything supports SRT. RTMP is pretty popular, so you might not have the choice. It might kind of be determined by what protocols are supported by the service you're streaming to and what you want to use. So you don't necessarily need to use UDP to get good performance. You can use TCP streaming. That'll work just fine a lot of the time.
All right, we got some more technical info here. Coming back to some earlier questions. It looks like the S23 Ultra in the Chinese market supports dual SIM, dual active, but not outside the Chinese market. Oh, that's so painful. So in China, you can use both radios, but once you leave China, it'll only use one. And of course, you heard what I just said about Speedify. Maybe it works for you in China, but I'm only willing to support you if you're outside China, so you're going to lose that. But maybe the OnePlus 11 actually supports dual SIM, dual active outside of China. I don't know. All right, this one of my Windows machines collect dust. Yeah. I've pretty much moved entirely to Mac at this point. But it's not 100% better, right? I mean, Windows is still better at actually Windows, resizing, tiling windows, doing interesting
the
things.
windowing system on Mac is
the Windows
strange.
It got a little bit better recently. Now you can drag windows to the side and have them take up half the screen, without any complexity. But I still don't understand
The buttons up at the top that you
why maximize. They made it the same as full screen, just not good. But anyway. So I've pretty much abandoned Windows, but there are things I miss. All right, so Brian is asking back to Flurm. What is he asking? So do you know which firmware your S23 Ultra is running? Is it the Chinese firmware that supports DSDA? So Flurm, if you're still there, Brian's got questions.
I guess if he was in Germany, I'm assuming no, but who knows?
Is the Connectify hotspot for a Windows router a dedicated machine, or can it use usual Windows activities to clear it as multi-threads? Yeah, you can do everything else. It works fine. It's an app that runs it installs a service in Windows that you can see in Control Panel when you list services, and it does that, and it runs a little app that's by the tray icon. You can absolutely use the computer at the same time. The only thing Windows does right is allow tethering with Android. That is one of the many things Windows does better than Mac. And it's entirely on purpose that you can't tether an Android phone. At least one of the RNDIS. I think some of the new Android phones just lie, basically, and say that they're a USB Ethernet adapter because, the Mac supports USB Ethernet adapters. Yeah, roaming is the problem. Yep. All right. Is there a standard way or set of protocols that VPNs use to encapsulate connection data, or is it up to the individual VPN software to figure out how to do it?
So there's a mix. So some of the common ones, OpenVPN was originally one of the, there's even other protocols too, but some of the common ones now that a lot of the third-party VPNs use. There's OpenVPN was very popular for a while because you could just, it's free software, you could run the servers and have that in the client apps. Now a lot of them have moved to using WireGuard or supporting WireGuard, which is UDP based. OpenVPN, I think, was by default a lot of times UDP based, but also had options for TCP. But then there's other ones like Speedify that we've implemented our own protocols for doing the bonding, and there's other VPNs that have implemented their own protocols for different reasons. But yeah, there's a bunch of them that are just clones of basically open source VPN software, and they slap their own UI on top of it and maybe add a few features or whatever. But
yeah, so Speedify security is not proprietary, right? We are using DTLS encryption. It is a standardized encryption, and we are actually using Google's boring SSL. We just straight up taking the encryption library out of the Chrome browser and using it, which is completely allowed by the license. And so that's great because Google can spend so much money on security, and they can pay big awards if anyone manages to hack the security. And so all the hackers try to hack their stuff, and if they succeed, they get a cash prize, and Google puts out an update, and then we grab the update and stick it right into Speedify. So we are aggressive followers on security, not leaders. But when it comes to the VPN protocols inside that tunnel, how we encapsulate packets, we are leaders doing things that nobody else does, right? No other protocol has the brains to think about how to juggle multiple internet connections and performance enhancing proxies and TCP acceleration and all of that stuff. It just isn't doable with the standard VPN protocols. So we had to make our own.
Yeah, and we have the flexibility of using, we can use TCP connections, we can use UDP connections, we can look like HTTPS traffic on restricted networks that have firewalls, and we can use different protocols across different internet connections to get the best performance, or if certain connections are blocking it, you don't have to put it all in one mode. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to having our own encapsulation protocols.
All right, Doug asks, when you run Speedify streaming performance test and it generates an error and you have to retry, how can I fix that? Or what do those streaming performance errors mean?
So yeah, there's some users on Windows that see that. It's kind of been a long-standing issue we've had trouble reproducing and fixing. There's some people that seem to get that. So yeah, it's still on our list to fix that. But I know there's some people on Windows that get that error occasionally running the streaming test, and we haven't figured out why. Something about their internet connections that are set up. But yeah, best thing to do is just retry it. But yeah, it's on our list to look into.
All right, funny enough, sounds like the OnePlus 12 and 13 do not support DSDA. 11 supported it, but 12 and 13 don't? All right, DSDA using both radios, that's not difficult. It's different problems of politics they don't allow. Yeah, maybe. There's also the issue that cellular radios use a lot of battery. And just keeping them alive and awake uses battery. And sending data on them, they on average use 3 times as much power per bit transferred as Wi-Fi does. So to keep 2 of these on is going to shorten your battery life a lot. And I mean, there are people like you, like me, who live stream and need reliability, and having their internet go out for even 1 minute is so awful that they're okay carrying extra battery packs in their pockets. But, much as I want to blame the politicians, I think the truth is that most people would rather have a battery that lasts all day. Or a phone that's not as thick as a brick.
Yeah, heat, I assume, is an issue.
Heat, oh man, these things get warm. When it's draining your battery, most of that is becoming heat in the phone. And yeah. All right, please make a router for my company with native Speedify. Sell to business customers. This would be amazing. We're here for you, man. Verizon, Justin. We've been working with Miri. This might be one for enterprise customers, but not lower. We got the Miri with built-in Speedify. We've got support now for the GLI nets. These things are nice. So, you guys reach out to us. We could do things for you. We have to rely on PepWave and Cradlepoint. Ugh. Yeah, man. That's not what you want. Reach out. All right. Yeah. So, not to turn this into an Alex and Doug thing, but I have been taking a wine sommelier class. I am on my path to become a sommelier. I can now.
I didn't realize you were doing that too.
Oh yeah. Okay. I can recognize Sauvignon Blanc now by the green pepper, the notes of green pepper, and they're real. It turns out this stuff is not old nonsense. You actually can. There are flavors that only exist in certain wines, and if you try them enough, with the right people explaining, you can figure it out. Crazy. All right, Speedify uses the DSDA. Androids have dual SIM on software code. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, Speedify asks the operating system about any internet connections that are available, and if there are multiple cellular connections active, the operating system will tell us about them, and we can potentially use them. But the cases where that actually happens are very rare. yeah, we have support in the software for doing that, at least on Android.
Any 5G gateways you recommend? I don't. I mean, this Miri, big bad box. It's got a 5G radio with 4 antennas. It's great. I know we have one of the GLInet 5G routers floating around here, and I've heard Speedify works on it, but I'm not sure that we have enough opinions to be able to say which ones can, which ones really go 250 megabits and which ones can go 700 megabits and how much battery they use to be able to say which is the best. I'm afraid I just don't know enough about the different brands. Right now we're mostly just making sure Speedify works on as many as we can. Must I download APK extra USB and sticks in a router for better connect my own home router?
So Speedify, to use a router, we only support OpenWRT right now for using on a router. So yeah, if you have an OpenWRT router, we have instructions on our site. There's a quick script you can run that'll download the packages and install them for you, assuming you have SSH access. And then, yeah, in terms of playing games, yeah, Speedify has some different features that can help. I mean, obviously you want the lowest latency possible, but if you're dealing with unreliable internet connections, Speedify does have a redundant mode that'll send packets over both internet connections at the same time and deliver whatever gets through first to kind of give you the lowest latency across both connections, or if one of them drops out or is unreliable, it can make sure your traffic is getting through. So a lot of gamers like that. But yeah, and then picking your Speedify server so that you're either somewhere close to you or somewhere close to your gaming server can be helpful.
All right. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Speedify 16 is out. You guys should update if you haven't yet. All right. I think we're going to call it here. We will be back next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. Check out our YouTube. We have a bunch of new videos out. Ones where we talk about using diamonds in microchips to cool them down. We talk about how Find My iPhone works and how to make it stop working if you steal a cell phone. Oops. It's just an experiment, but I ended up giving a fantastic demonstration. And a bunch about how the phones use the satellites now as LTE towers and can get internet. So you should check it out. So YouTube, Speedify, there's a lot of good stuff there. And I'll see you guys all. If you got more questions, I see they're still coming in, but I think we are done here. You can send an email to support@speedify.com, or you can join us again next week, same time, 10 a.m. Eastern, whatever time zone you're in 1 hour ago.
Yeah, I know we're around daylight savings. When's daylight savings? Is that this weekend or the following?
It's apparently this weekend.
Okay, so that's gonna
What
mess up the. We'll be off by an hour from what we were this week then.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you all online.